Welcome everyone, this is Nixie Meets. Welcome to episode number 3. Today with us we have Megan. She's a wife, a mother to a tender 5-year-old boy, certified child life specialist and researcher. She has a double Master Science in Cognitive Neuroscience and Neuroimaging with specialization in developmental neuroscience and child life. Her desire is to help utilize her background and training to empower caregivers and children to be their own advocates in both healthcare setting and in life. Whoa, Megan, what a description. I'm super happy to have you in Nixie Meets. It's a pleasure talking with you. How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You have a great career. You studied a lot. That's very interesting. Why don't you talk a little bit about your passion? How did you get involved in the child life world? Where does your passion come from?
Well, I have always been really passionate about working with children and specifically the pediatric population. And I started volunteering in my undergrad at a child life hospital in Southern California, and I was volunteering with the child life department. And I just really fell in love with what they were doing and the field and sort of their passion and their purpose. And following that time of volunteering at that children's hospital, I really wanted to gain a better understanding of a child's brain and how it works from all stages of development, which is why I decided to go into the neuroscience and neuroimaging path. I just felt like having a really great understanding of the developing brain would be really beneficial in my future service with children. And then following that master's, I decided to go back into child life. I just wanted to be back in the hospital. I wanted to be providing therapeutic support one-on-one for patients instead of in sort of a lab. And so that's how I ended up back in child life. But it really started at my undergrad at a children's hospital, just seeing what the child life specialists did and the support that they provided. And I fell in love with the field.
Okay, and how do you use your studies you did after your child life experience, all this neuroscience, the cognitive studies you've done, how this has affected you on your day-to-day job with children?
I think it really provided a solid foundation because not only do I understand how to provide psychosocial support to children, I understand therapeutic play, but I really understand what's going on internally in their brain. I understand what happens when trauma occurs, and I understand how that impacts the developing brain from a neuroscience standpoint. So I feel like it benefits me as far as catering my interventions to their specific needs to sort of help boost any sort of serotonin that they may need, or I understand their fight, flight, or fright reaction and sort of what I need to do to help them work through or process any of the things that are going on cognitively, emotionally, and developmentally.
And how do you think a child's brain or experience in a hospital may change if they have the proper preparation from a child life expert, or if they don't have it? How can this affect to their brain development as a child?
Well, I think what can happen is if a child doesn't have the proper preparation or the proper tools to build resiliency and help them cope, they can end up actually getting stuck in this place of fear or stress and anxiety. And then they leave with these post-trauma symptoms. And that's much harder to work through than if we had to have done the work in the beginning to help them be able to process and understand and cope. Essentially, we're building resiliency within them emotionally, but also cognitively in their brain. We're building up those mechanisms so that they can cope with their procedures. And essentially, we're preventing them from, lifelong trauma.
That's really interesting because this resiliency, I'm sure it will affect them after their life experience, right? For their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the more we build resiliency, the more that we're building them up for success in the future with anything that they face, not just medical experiences.
That's so interesting. And you talk a lot about it in your own blog. You're an entrepreneur too. You created your own blog, The Coping Corner. We will leave below the link so everyone can check it out, because it's really, really interesting. You have a lot of content there. And how do you think creating this blog helped you spread the word? Do you think it's getting out there? The parents understand the importance of their child's preparation in hospital?
Yes, I think so. I created the blog. It's funny because I had finished my time at UCLA and I entered into this pandemic, and my son could no longer go to school and I was just at home, and I'm so passionate about empowering caregivers. I really, identify with my patients' parents, and I really want to help support them so they can support their kids, right? So it becomes a long-term thing. And I was trying to think of ways of how can I do this outside of the hospital when everybody's at home, but children still need to see a doctor, right? They're still going to the hospital. So I created the Coping Corner as a way to still be able to provide that support to parents who might need it. And that's how it started. I had a blog years ago, and I still had a following of parents who have followed me throughout my life and my academic journey. And I would get questions all the time of, how can I help my child with this procedure? How can I help prepare my child for surgery? Or my child is terrified of needles. We keep having to hold him down on his back at the hospital. And I was getting so many of these questions and, daily. And I was like, I need to create a space that I can send these parents to, where it gives my advice and a step-by-step of how they can help their child, and also provide them with the tools, like the scientific backing of the CDC and the American Academy of Pediatrics, so they could feel armed enough without a child life specialist to go in and really advocate for their children and to create better experiences, not only for their kids, but for the parents too, because it can be just as traumatizing for a mother or father or caregiver to go in and have to hold their screaming child down. So I wanted to provide them with those tools. And I think that it's been really well received. And I was able to sort of also help children reintegrate back into the classroom through this, since, one of my areas of expertise is trauma and trying to mitigate trauma. And so I was able to develop materials for school reintegration, help prepare teachers on how to have kids come back in the classroom following a global crisis. So I think it's been well received, and I'm just so happy to have that tool. And, we always say in child life, as long as we help one, then we've done our job. And that's all I really wanted out of it.
Well, what's your experience? What do you think about when parents are preparing their child at home? Do you think this also helps the parents as well? Or because there's something we experience a lot in what we do in ICSI for Children, is that we find a lot of parents that are kind of afraid to talk about surgery at home, because they think if they talk too much to the child, maybe it will be worse after. What do you think? Is this something that happens to you a lot? You find this kind of experiences with parents?
Oh, absolutely. And even with myself in the beginning of my training, there were things that I didn't want to say. I didn't want to have to tell a child who was going in for a tonsillectomy that it was going to feel painful when they woke up, but actually preparing them for the idea that you might have a sore throat when you wake up is actually better for them than to wake up and be shocked by the pain, right? And be like, what's going on? Why did nobody tell me that this was going to happen? And I think as parents, I know for myself, our natural inclination is to protect our children. And we think we're protecting them by not telling them the potentially scary information, when in fact, what we're doing is we're not preparing them, and we're losing their trust then. And then they become more scared and more anxious with each following appointment or procedure that they're going to have. But if we can prepare them using language that they understand, giving them just enough information, because it's a dance, right? You don't want to not tell them anything, but you also don't want to overwhelm them with information. So it's a really kind of fine line of telling them exactly what they need to know in language that they can understand and relate back to their real life and their world, that is really going to benefit them going into a procedure. Because now They know what's going to happen. They understand what's going to happen, because a lot of words that we use in the medical world sound and can mean something totally different to a child. If we tell a child, we're going to put you under, they're going to say, what are you going to put me under? I'm going underwater. It's so literal to them. So, or if we even just a tiny slip of the word, like we're going to give you sleepy medicine as opposed to medicine that's going to help you go to sleep. Sleepy could be like, well, I'm going to still be awake, because you can be sleepy and still be awake, right? So they're going to think, well, I'm still going to be awake in this surgery. If I'm still awake, am I going to feel everything? So we have to be really careful about the language that we use to prepare children, but doing it in the right way. And we're going to fumble and we're going to mess up. And there was a time I didn't tell a child she was going to have a sore throat when she woke up, and she was really upset when she woke up. And so then I had to do damage control then, and I never did that again, So we're going to mess up. She was okay. Our kids are going to be okay. But I think as long as we proactively try our best to prepare children for the things that they're going to experience, it not only builds trust for us and for them, but it also then enables them to start building their own coping and ways that they can cope. So I like to prepare children. I tell them what they need to know. I give them the language, give them the tools, and then try and offer them some control. How do you think this situation could be made better? What can we do so that you feel more safe? What can we do? Would you like to watch an iPad? Do you want me to tell you a story? Do you want to watch the procedure, or do you want to look away? Do you want the nurse to count to 3, or do you not want the nurse to count to 3? All these things give them little bits of control here and there to make them feel less out of control in a situation. And that's just empowering them, and then empowering the caregivers too.
That's something that parents ask us a lot, because they say, okay, I'm gonna let my child choose, but then there's non-negotiables, right? There's some things that you cannot negotiate.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I think, knowing the non-negotiables before you go into it is really important, not giving them a choice that they actually can't make. Sometimes when I was preparing my son, for example, to have an allergy test, I actually wasn't sure going in if he was going to be able to. I love to give body autonomy wherever I can, because, as parents, we're constantly teaching our children consent over their own body, trying to give them power over their own body, especially in situations that are somewhat feel invasive. But I didn't know if he would be able to choose to have the skin prick on his arm or on his back. So that's something I didn't give him the option of until I went into the allergist, and I went aside and I said, hey, can we do this on his arm, or can we do it on his back? And he said, you can decide. And so then I went to my son and I said, hey, buddy, when they do the test, would you like them to do the little pokes on your arm or on your back? And gave him that choice, and he chose. And the allergist had said, I think it's going to be easier on the arm, but my son really wanted it on his back. That was his choice. And so that's where he did it, and he did great. I mean, he didn't even flinch. He didn't move a muscle. He was fine. And I think those little things, being able to offer them those little attainable choices, is so beneficial, because now they feel like they're part of the experience, and they are now given some control back. If children are given no control, we know what happens, right? They feel out of control, and then they act out of control. So, because they don't know how else to express themselves other than to act out, right? If they're kind of put in this box. So I think especially toddlers and preschoolers and young school age, it's really important for them to feel like they have this sort of sense of control going into a situation where they're feeling really scared and out of control.
Yeah, that's really interesting at the beginning, because when you don't know anything about the child life world, or you have no experience on the healthcare world, and you think about children going into a hospital, you imagine, at least that's something that happened to me, you imagine a really small person that's afraid and that doesn't understand anything, and your job as a child life specialist is to give them power, because they have the capacity to understand a lot more than what we think, and they are listening all the time. And if you give them the right tools for them to cope with what's happening, it's really amazing to see how strong they are.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, kids are so almost innately resilient. And so when we give them some of those tools to build upon that resiliency, it is amazing what they can do. And, you know, I've had so many parents be like, I can't believe they didn't cry, or I can't believe that they were totally fine and that they were laughing. This was amazing. And I think so much of the medical world can feel so overwhelming to children, and to parents. You know, parents feel like they have no power. They don't know medicine. They don't understand the terminology all of the time. And they feel like they don't get to have these choices, when in fact, parents are just as much a part of the team as the medical staff, you know, especially in a family-centered care model, which most hospitals function under now. Parents are made a part of that team, and what they say matters, and they know their child better than anybody else. So if they know that their child is going to do better sitting up and being held on their lap, then they have every right to advocate for that for their kids. And so much of what I do is trying to give that power back to parents too, so that they can provide a safe space for their kids, and then their kids feel empowered and they feel safe, and everyone just leaves like on a much better note, right?
Right. That's something that you, as a mother, of course, you must have experienced that. When do you feel a super strong connection with your child, and then that happens a lot. That we see every day in hospitals. When we see afraid parents, most of the times the child is afraid too. But when the opposite happens, when the parents are empowered too, children tend to be a lot more calm and a lot more empowered as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there have been so many studies and research done that if a parent is anxious, then the child is going to be anxious. Our children sense what we are feeling, and if we're scared and we're anxious, they're going to be scared and they're going to be anxious. That's just sort of how that connection works. Part of what I do is really providing parents with as much information as I can and as many tools as I can, so that they're going into these situations without the fear and anxiety, and that only benefits their children.
You talk a lot about medical play. Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's medical play? What can parents do at home to help their children?
Medical play can be as simple as getting those like plastic doctor's kits from Target or Amazon, and just having your child explore and play. You can use dolls, you can use stuffed animals, and just having them, enter into that medical world themselves, where they're the doctor and they get to do the pokes, and they get to check the blood pressure, and they get to do the vitals. And it's not only normalizing medicine and healthcare for them, but it's also, again, providing them with some control. Or if they have had some negative experiences, this play allows them to play out those negative experiences and sort of release it from their bodies, release it from their minds, and kind of work through some of that trauma. Because we know play is the language of children, right? It's how they learn, it's how they grow, it's how they develop cognitively, emotionally, developmentally. Play is life for children, and play is not as simple as just like this child is running around and they're playing with their toys, but they are learning and they are processing emotions all through play. And so medical play is such a vital part of what we do, because it's normalizing these healthcare experiences for kids, and it's allowing them to play out some of their feelings surrounding these healthcare experiences.
Something that shocks me a lot, and that has happened for real, that I was talking to a doctor who was super top doctor in a hospital, really well-known, recognized doctor. And I was talking to him about the importance of child life, because in the hospital he was working in, there was no child life psychologist at all. He was saying something like, oh, yeah, that's okay, but these people they're just playing. I mean, it's not that important. And I was thinking, man, no, you didn't understand anything.
Yeah, we get that a lot. That we are just there to play, or just there to have fun, or, you know, just there to like bring an iPad. There's, you know, people are learning more about what we do, and we really have been able to, over the years, we can talk about what we do, but it's when they see us in action that medical staff goes, oh, that's what you do. That's why you're here. And then we get called all the time. So it's really, once you see a child life specialist in action, once you have had this child who refuses to do any sort of medical procedure, or who screams, who cries, who thrashes, or refuses to take their medicine, and then after an hour of being with a child life specialist, all of a sudden they're able to do all of these things, or we're able to get them back into the OR where they were once kicking and screaming and refusing, because we just know how to speak to children, and we know how to validate what they're experiencing and allow them to sort of work through those emotions to get them to do the things that are going to help them. Once staff sort of sees us in action and doing it, then they're like, oh, okay, can you come back for this? Can you come back for that? And then we're paged all the time. But I do think a big misconception about what we do is that we're just there to play. And you know what? Even if we were just there to play, that is an incredibly crucial part of childhood, especially within a hospital setting.
That's something I love about the child life especially, is that almost all of you are influencers. You're all the time spreading the word, getting the world to know about child life, and that's something I think it's really, really important, because you're helping the word spread. A lot of people is learning about child life for the first time when they get to hospital, parents that haven't heard about that, and it's a service they always love. It's something that works all the time.
Oh. Absolutely. I think there's so many parents that come into the hospital and don't really have a full understanding of the scope of child life, or haven't gotten to experience child life. But I was so thankful to have such amazing patients during my time. And, you know, I had patients where they would absolutely not do a procedure unless I could be there with them, or they wouldn't have been able to do the procedure if I wasn't there with them. I had a teenager who was a cardio patient, and she had to have an MRI with coils. It was very overwhelming, and she was very anxious about it. And they tried to do it a couple times before, and they couldn't get it done. And so I worked, you know, very closely with that team for a long time, and we were able to do it. I went in with her to the MRI. I advocated for a mirror inside the MRI machine so she could see me out, so she could see out and she could see me the whole time. I was able to touch her legs so that I could help ground her and keep her, you know, present. And it turned out great. It was amazing. We all high-fived, all the nurses, the radiologists. You know, this was a really important thing that she needed to do, and she couldn't do it. And it's just another example of how, if, you know, we take the time to work with the patients and have child life available, there's so many things that we can accomplish, and so many different ways that we can help patients and help the team get what they need.
Amazing. With that beautiful story, I think it's a great way to end this interview. I will be talking with you the whole evening, because you have a different view. I think it's really, really interesting because of your studies. You understand a lot further, and it's really amazing. I invite everyone to go check your blog. As I said, we will leave the link below. It's been a pleasure, Megan. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.